this is it's Mental Podcast. I'm Moni Zhang. This is how to introduce yourself.
Okay, to introduce myself now.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, Moni. Hi, everyone else. This is Chris. I'm Chris Doering. I'm a stand-up comedian here in Berlin. I run a couple of different shows under the banner of propaganda comedy and laughing school comedy. Propaganda comedy I run with Brothers Christian. And so we have a couple of different shows that we run here, and we do run quite a few shows and just all around Europe. So we have a couple of tours that we do in the Nordics, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Western Europe. And yeah, I've been doing comedy for stand-up comedy, actually not that long. I think it's been 7 years or so. And I did German, I don't know if you can call it comedy. It's like cabaret. So it's a slightly different comedy version. I did that for about 5 years, 6 years before that. Yeah. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. In terms of my professional background, yeah.
Yeah, I think if our audience, any of them are in Berlin and go to stand-up comedy, they should have known you because you are everywhere.
Well, I mean, it would be nice to think that, but at the same time, you can never overestimate just how unknown you are. This is amazing. I mean, you see it as well with the shows because you already put on some shows yourself. Like every time there's people like, oh, I've been to a comedy show in Berlin. And it's not that I've just arrived to Berlin. No, they've been in Berlin 5, 6 years, even longer. It's like, I've just never been to a comedy show. I didn't even know there was comedy in English here.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them also, they've gone sort of to the older shows and those, so they've gone to like Cosmic Comedy and to like Sing Hats with the news and like that. So the sort of the more known quantities, I'd say.
Yeah. So this podcast is about mental health. Could you please introduce a little bit your relationship with mental health?
Should I introduce my mental health? I don't know if I can adequately do that. It's funny. I was actually quite grateful because you put on a little while ago, just before the lockdown, a show on mental health. It was a charity, a fundraiser, and it was quite cool that you did approach me as well, because it did sort of give me a chance to reflect on it a little bit more, because I don't really talk about that much in my comedy. Because there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, it's one of those things that you're kind of scared of to just go into too deeply and think about it too much, because it could potentially, if you don't do it well enough, like for instance in the context of therapy, that just you go down the wrong path and just basically bring yourself down and create more problems for yourself than you actually want to. That's one reason. And the second reason, I feel I don't want to talk about it too much in my comedy and in my art, in terms of I don't want to, like, it's like stolen valor in a way. I mean, like, I don't want to pathologize it too much, where I'm like saying, oh yeah, I have these definite clinical issues, and by comparison to someone who actually has these issues to a much more severe degree, you feel like you just sort of you're putting that down. You're kind of making it seem lighter than it actually is for someone who's suffering from a lot more than I do. Because I feel with a lot of these things, when you look into it, like from a psychological, neurological perspective, a lot of these things are on the spectrum where degrees of severity, I'd say. Anyway, there's a long way around to say that I think a lot of that had sort of to do with feelings of inadequacy, sort of, especially sort of in my teen years compared to my parents, that sort of created for myself, I would say. It wasn't even necessarily, although I have talked about this previously in therapeutic sessions, in terms of where I felt there was sort of implicit expectations, even though they never explicitly stated, no, you need to do this and this and that. I thought there was always sort of this understood baseline of levels of achievement that you have to have, which that created a lot of pressure on me, and then in turn created sort of these severe feelings of inadequacy that then, brought me down quite a bit in my teens, which at the time I really felt was, okay, like every teen goes through that. I thought, like, this is perfectly normal. Like, I want to kill myself. I think every teen wants to do that. That's all right. And then, yeah, it's a classic thing where you don't really, I think specifically as a man or as a male teenager, unless you have a very good, strong bond with other male friends, don't really talk about these kind of things, like your emotions and feelings. You know? So unless you're already taking the step to find some kind of therapy setting, or you have a strong bond with some female friends, for instance, then you don't really get to talk that much about your feelings. At least sort of that was my experience. So I didn't, and I hid a lot of that, which then in turn made it worse. And so yeah, I've been going through that. So the way I dealt with it was just overcompensating with essentially work. So I started working pretty early on, like age. I mean, I did like all the classic things, you know, like paper routes and all that stuff, starting at 12. But then yeah, with like 17, I started working a lot as a waiter in like high class restaurants and hotels, which was interesting. And then I started doing like a whole bunch of things, and I started traveling a lot. And then sort of whenever I was studying or somewhere else, I would have like 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, which is basically still the case now, because I only went full-time stand-up comedy last year, and up until that point I had like basically 2 different jobs also at the same time. And yeah, so that's always been kind of a bad one, but it's been a coping mechanism for me. Because I distract myself and put so much work on my schedule that I don't really have to think about how I'm feeling, what I'm doing. And another really bad but very useful coping mechanism for me is overeating. Yes, that's the one I always do.
So I think it's funny with your eating disorder because...
well, I wouldn't call it eating disorder, because again, it would pathologize to a degree where I think it diminishes someone who's actually suffering from this.
Yeah, okay, let's call it your eating issues. Because for a very long time, I didn't believe you have any mental illness. And you know that all stand-up comedians say they have some mental illness, but with you, I kind of feel you just say it to fit in, to be part of us. Then one day, I think we were chatting. You said, "Oh, I gained how much kilos? Like 10 kilos during the lockdown, or even more. Is 10 or even more?"
No. There was over said more than that. But for me, it was something like 7 or 8. That was the first lockdown.
Yeah, you said like, "Oh, I gained like 8 kilos during lockdown," and I was like, "Oh, with that many kilos, probably you do have some issues going on," because normal people wouldn't allow them to gain so much weight in such short time.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. This is why I'm feeling like it's weird, because again, I wouldn't call it a mental illness necessarily, because it's not diagnosed, so I don't know if it raises to that level. Secondly, I guess I'm probably even afraid to have it diagnosed, because I wouldn't necessarily want that label. Even though I think that peer pressure of trying to fit in with a group who self-ascribes to sort of mental pathology is strong, and probably have that pressure on me as well. But at the same time, specifically with this, what's happening now with this lockdown, the second one that we're experiencing right now, I think that's something that's becoming more common anyway, even for people, again, who you wouldn't necessarily call mentally ill. So yeah, again, I don't know if that's necessarily sort of a sign, a definitive sign for anything happening. But again, this has been, how should I say this? This has been a pattern for me for a while. Like, I've always had that, like in times of very intense stress, I do tend to overeat. And that's the funny thing, because as I said, just bringing on stress on myself is one of my other coping mechanisms. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sort of the more stress I have, the more I will eat. The more I will eat, the more stress it causes me. And it's just sort of a vicious cycle.
I have the similar issue too. Until I think 2 years ago, I watched Udemy course on how to control your weight. And one of the tips I really like is that because you feel guilty and stressful, and then you tend to eat more. So one trick is that when you eat, do eat something which you will not feel guilty of later. So for example, now I always have like 3-4 kilos of orange at home. And when I really want to stress eat, I just eat 2 kilos of oranges.
Well, that's great.
I appear a lot, but
well, this is all better as well. No, my biggest issue is because, and goes right into what you just said, feeling guilty for it, is that I have an incredible sweet tooth. Like, it's amazing to me that I still don't have diabetes, which but so I even have a couple of jokes about this. Like growing up, I hated fruits. I wasn't a big fan of vegetables. That's slightly changed a little bit with trying to be a good role model for my kids now. In terms of vegetables, at least fruits, I still abhor. So that's unfortunately not a good option for me. So my thing is always sweets. Like I overeat sweets to an insane amount. And I feel guilty for 2 reasons. Because A, it's not the thing you're supposed to do, and 2, I sometimes just kind of don't have control over myself. Like it's in the house, I have to have it. It doesn't matter if it's even my partner's. Like I will eat my partner's sweets, which is again not very good at all. And then it'll give me further feelings of okay, that you really shouldn't have done it. And then what I do is I buy new ones just to replace the ones that I've eaten, and I will eat those again. So so yeah, that's not great, I'd say, but but yeah, that's a good trick. You should probably eat stuff that you don't feel too guilty about. I try to do it because obviously it's like one of those things. You have certain things that you're trying to improve upon yourself, sort of also reducing weight and eating more healthily. It's one of those classic things that everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to do it for a while, and I've had periods of success where I lost weight. Like my life has not been a series of just getting fatter. Even though it seems like it now. I've had times
I mean, even
when I got slimmer. I know you won't believe it right now, but it's true. It is absolutely true.
Even now, I wouldn't call you fat. I think you.
No,
I
don't think it.
Yeah.
I'm charmingly chubby, is what I would call it.
Yeah. So, what are you talking about? Your teenage years that you were mentally close. Was there a trigger one day or some period that you start to open up or you start to realize you have issues?
That's a very good question. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if there's like a specific trigger. It's just something that now in hindsight sort of I see a little bit more clearly. Because again, as I said earlier, at the time, I think I felt sort of like it was pretty normal. Like I projected that onto everyone else. I was like, this is a normal thing that everybody goes through. It's like only later when I've been talking more with people and sort of more close friendships to share a bit more, and I got better at sort of sharing my feelings as well. And then I realized, oh no, this is not something that everybody goes through. And so at the time, so that's why I find it difficult now to find a specific moment when it started. I would just sort of generally say with my team, I don't know, it was started at 12 or 13, something like that. I would now say.
I think it's very interesting. When I first got depressed, I checked some information online. One information I read at that time shocked me a lot. It says, on average, people who suffers from mental illness or mental disorder, on averagely, people takes 10 years to look for help. So, and at that time, it was so shocking for me. I was like, how come? How can anyone suffer from this for 10 years, then look for help? And I thought, oh, I'm lucky because I just started this and I'm already looking for help. Then through the process of therapy and the treatment, I realized, oh, my issue started way earlier, probably like as I was a child. So you only start to see the issues once you start to get help. And when you don't know you have the issues, it's just something was not right, but you just don't know what is not right.
Yeah, I think that's something that's a very common thing for people in general, regardless of whether or not they have mental health issues. Like you normalize your life, you assume that whatever you're experiencing is normal. So if you have issues at first, or if you're suffering at first, you don't even realize that you are suffering until you hit some kind of I don't know if it's even a breaking point, but yeah, for some people it's a breaking point. It's sort of like just a compound issue of why is this not getting better? Like why am I not going anywhere or succeeding anywhere in life? And then you start. I think that's when you start reflecting a little bit more on like what is it that's really bad.
Yeah.
And some people then like you, and it's very good. I'm very happy that you took this step and actively seek help and seek therapy and all these things that you can do to help yourself.
When did you what made you to start to seek for therapy?
For me, I think it was exactly what I just described. So again, projecting for myself. So like, I felt like I'm doing all these things. Again, since one of my things is that I'm just doing so many things at the same time. It's not like, well, shouldn't I be then therefore much further ahead? Shouldn't I already have a stable job? Like one of the things that I wanted to do for a long time, because I was in research a lot. I was a research assistant and a lot of different projects. I was like jumping from one project to another. In a way, it was good for me because it allowed me to travel and work in research in a bunch of different countries. I would just jump into research projects at the same time. If you want to have a career in research, like the obvious thing is you need to get into a graduate program. You need to get a PhD, a doctorate degree, or something like that. And I just couldn't get into anything. And I was looking for that a while. And when I came back to Berlin for the first, about a year, I was trying pretty hard as well, just all across mostly Germany, but then I extended a little bit European-wide and just couldn't get anywhere. And that's sort of the feeling where it's like, okay, how is this possible? I feel like I did so much. I feel I did so much in this area. So what exactly is holding me back? And that's when I started looking more and more into one of my feelings, first of all, like on a professional level, but then more and more I discovered, okay, there's maybe also some like personal failings and personal inadequacies, and then just sort of patterns of behavior that lead to that. Like, why am I not getting these things that I would like to get?
Yeah, so with the therapy, how long have you go through it?
Oh, I'm not actually in therapy. I was in therapy for a little while, for about 2 years. I'm trying to think, is it 8 years ago? About 10 years ago, I would say. It's 10 years ago. I was in London, so I was in therapy for about 2.5 years. I was in London because I was earning a decent wage at the time that I could afford it, and then I have not been. I'm trying to think, was it in therapy in Mexico? No, I haven't been in actual therapy since.
So the therapy 10 years ago, what was the first step you think, oh, I should go to get a therapy? Was it hard? Because you also said that with your teenager year.
I mean, finding the therapy itself, like the actual mechanism of finding someone, wasn't that hard. Although I did go to 2 different people, like I wasn't really happy with the first person, so I went to another one and to another therapist. And I think just taking account of, I think the biggest step for me and what I would describe as hard in hindsight is the moment from going, oh, maybe you're just a loser, maybe you're just not as good as you thought, and then going from that to, but maybe the reason why you're a loser is like some other issues that you can work on. I think that was the biggest step for me. First, sort of accepting in general, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're just not, sort of the acceptance of inadequacy compared to your expectations, and then thinking, yeah, maybe there's something wrong with those expectations and where are they coming from, and then saying there is something you can do about that. I think that leap, go from the one thing to the other thing, to then actively seek some help. I think that was the hardest or at least it took the longest to convince myself that might be all right. Because again, there's always this sort of stigma. Like as soon as you seek therapy, is like you either think of yourself or you think others might think of you as some kind of lunatic. Which, funnily enough, I don't know what your experience with this has been. Just absolutely isn't true. As soon as you do talk to people about it, like people are supportive and very understanding. But you do harbor that fear of people will definitely think of me as somehow defective.
Yeah.
Which is why it's great to be in a comedy group, because a group that self-ascribes so much to psychological issues, everyone immediately accepts you.
Yeah, yeah.
If you raise any type of issue, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that issue, yeah, I've had that." It's like, that's nothing compared to what I've got.
Yeah, I think when I started the comedy, I actually had a chat with you at that time. I was really like everywhere mentally. I think discovering the comedy world was really a blessing for me, because in my normal life, I don't know anyone who have it. Oh, now reflecting back, I think probably there are lots of people have some mental issues, but in my background from China, people hide it a lot. And also in professional life, it's not something people are willing to talk about. So living in an atmosphere like that, it's very easy to think I'm the only one who have mental illness and it's something wrong of me. But discovering the comedy world, realize, oh, it's such a common thing, and people talk about it, people joke about it. It feels just safe to deal with my own issue instead of beating myself down a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is a great thing about it. At the same time, for instance, for me personally, I still have that thing where I try to not make an issue as much as possible. I mean, you did say that you were sort of quite surprised when we talked to you about this, and you sort of felt like, oh, maybe that's an issue, because I do still, to this day, very much try to be, specifically in something that I feel is a professional setting, like if I'm at work, and again, for me, comedy is work, to me, it's my workplace, so I try very hard to conduct myself professionally and sort of not. And that's also another thing that I've learned with like dealing with artists, being an artist yourself. You also, at least that's my thing, I try not to burden other people with my issues. That's like one of the. Also, that comes back to. I think a lot of that comes back to my parents. And it was like a big thing. It's like you deal with your things first, and then you come to us. Like, don't burden us with your issues. And so I still sort of, to this day, very much sort of try to, in general, not very open about these things. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I very much appreciate it that you put on this show, because it gave me a moment, another chance to sort of reflect a little bit more about this. This is why I wrote a couple of jokes about it, which previously I hadn't really issued in my comedy.
Yeah, I think this is a very good topic to work on. Not saying to burden our issues to the audience, but I do think when we can share our vulnerability, it creates a safe place for audience to reflect on themselves too. Since I start to talk about my issues openly, there are more and more people come to me. They say they feel the same, and they've been wondering, and they ask me how to get help. I do feel this it's a condition, or it's an issue that way more common than people normally think. But the society around us just don't. It's not safe enough for everyone to reflect on themselves, and there are too many like a coded language using. For example, this time in Christmas, I visited France with my partner. So I started to talk with his remote family, and we were chatting, and suddenly my boyfriend asked, "Oh, hey, what's your sister is doing?" Then the cousins start to say, oh, it's complicated. She's searching for what she wants to do, and she's a bit confused. And I was like, this sounds a little bit weird. Then I approached his cousin later, and we had a one-on-one chat. He asked me what I'm working on. Then I said, hey, I'm working on this project. It's about the comedy and the mental illness because I was depressed and I want to help more people. Then he started to talk, oh, interesting. And he asked me more questions. Then at the end, I asked, do you know anyone who's depressed who can subscribe to my channel? He's like, oh, my sister is depressed. I was like, yeah, then I was like, oh, I knew it. He's like, how did you know? I said, because you said it's complicated and you didn't want to talk about your sister. Then I already knew it's a coded language. So I think the fact that with the mental illness on one hand, people we need to deal with the illness itself, but on the other hand, dealing with the stigma around the mental illness also takes even probably for me more energy because you need to hide, you need to feel shame about yourself, and you need to feel isolated because you don't want to talk with others, so others will not talk with you. So it's lots of extra burden with it.
I think that's a big issue about this, like exactly what you said, that the whole point of isolation and sort of self-isolation, not being able to, or at least feeling like you're not able to talk to others. I mean, this is why therapy is such a big thing in people's life, because it's exactly the place where they can open up. And the reason why it's such an important place where people can open up is exactly what you said, is because they don't feel safe to open up in their natural environment with their friends and their family. And this is again sort of why I feel like I love the word you use, or the phrase you use, mental journeys, because I think that's something, again, everybody's going through, and it's just a matter of degrees of severity, sort of just a matter of where are you on the spectrum. Because again, it's not super helpful to pathologize it in a degree where you always call it an illness, because again, that immediately brings up the stigma.
Yeah.
Where I think, just like you said, most people are dealing with some kind of difficulty or other. And the question, does it raise to a level of severity where it actually cripples you and really hinders you in living your life and pursuing your goals? I think that's when you can start talking about it more pathologically. But previously to that point, I guess, everybody is struggling one way or another. And the biggest issue about it is that apparently no one feels really safe to talk about it with their loved ones.
Yeah.
And then there was a big thing for me, certainly. The reason for why I didn't continue my therapy journey, if I use that word, all those years ago was twofold. I was leaving in London, so I was just leaving my therapist at the time. And then financially, it just wasn't in a place. Like the next couple of years, I simply wasn't financially in a place where I could do it. So, and then it kind of just stopped and haven't really gone back to it. Interestingly enough, I know if you remember that, but when you put on that show, like the one joke I wrote about this as well, is that is kind of true. I do feel like becoming a parent has helped me that, certainly. I don't know if it's necessarily because I'm less sort of self-involved in the sense that I just don't worry about this. I worry a lot more about my children now, and I worry about myself. So again, maybe it's just another way of just not trying not to look at myself and my issues. But I feel sort of having this caring position for another human being sort of does help me to figure out myself a little bit more as well. Sort of like, I don't know. I'm trying to find a good way to describe it. I don't necessarily know how to. It's not that I'm figuring out my issues more, because I don't think that's the case. I think it's a matter of through trying to raise your kids a bit more openly and trying to help them to open up about their feelings. It maybe gives me a chance also, because I do sometimes, talk to my kids, daddy's feeling a bit sad right now. So I try to also be a bit more about my feelings as well. So yeah, maybe that's the part that helps me. That's sort of a pseudo.
I actually am quite curious with being a parent because I talked this with my therapist a few times. Because I'm depressed and I have all the issues, the burden from my original family, I just cannot imagine myself to have my own kid. For example, right now I have two dogs, and even raising them sometimes make me feel like, oh, I cannot be a parent because, for example, when I look at my partner, he would play with the dogs and really have like an interaction, like a mental interaction with them, and to grab their attention and to play. But because from my original family, I never played with my parents. We never have this interaction. So I sometimes look at my dogs. I just feel, oh, I'm glad for they are just dogs. As long as I give them food, it's okay. I don't have to really have like emotional interaction with them. But if it's a child, I don't know. I feel I would be tremendously guilty because I don't know how to just have any emotional interaction and to besides to talk. I don't know how to play. I don't know how to have this kind of physical contact. And I don't know. Thinking about raising my own kids make me feel tremendously guilty.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's again sort of a burden that you put on yourself in terms of you have the expectation that you have to have some very sort of deep emotional connection while you're interacting with your children, for instance, during a play or during other times. And the reality that I found, either I'm a sociopath or it is fairly normal that you just don't have a lot of emotional connections a lot of your times when you interact with the children. And again, maybe I've thought about this myself, where it's like, is this normal? Like, shouldn't I be feeling really strong feelings of love and compassion when I'm like around my children? A lot of times you really don't. A lot of times you're just like, okay, let's get through this, let's do this, and sort of worrying about practical issues and don't really feel that strong emotional bond and connections. And that's another thing that, for instance, again, it goes about expectations, because what I just said, that sounds really good. Well, there are times when I talk to my children about emotion, but in reality, that doesn't happen very often. A lot of times, also, I'm just annoyed and I'm sitting next to my children while they're trying to play with me, and I'm just annoyed and I just want to listen to like a YouTube video or something like that. You know what I mean? And you have those moments, and then later on, you feel guilty for those because it's like, oh, this is my children. Like, A, am I teaching them that they're not validated in my presence? And B, I'm missing some kind of connection that I'm having with my children. And then C, I'm just being a terrible role model in terms of how to have human interactions. But yeah, I mean, it's like the whole thing that you mentioned, mental journeys, is all about, I think, overcoming that guilt, right? Like, I'm definitely not at that point yet. I still feel guilty for that constantly, but I think my point is in terms of what you said, in terms of your expectation for, oh, I need to have this very strong emotion. What my personal experience has been, a lot of the time you just don't. so therefore, maybe the expectation should be there.
Yeah. I think.
Or I'm a sociopath. I don't know. It's one of those.
Probably you are a sociopath. I like what you said about the mental journey. I start to feel like I'm very open with my mental situation. I like to talk about it, but I do feel I start to encounter more people in my life that I can clearly see they have issues and they have very serious issues, but they are still in the phase of denial. this phase can last very long. I guess if someone told me I have depression 10 years ago, I would be furious. I would be so angry and fear.
How could you think of me that way?
Yeah,
Such a lowly status, someone who's depressed, right?
Yes.
The status thing, right?
Yeah, so I think admitting you have issues is the first step of getting better. However, when I encounter those people who are still in denial phase, I realize it's as long as they get help, it's better than they admit they have depression or they have mental illness. So I start to change my wording a bit. For example, this time I talk with a friend. She every day she only sleep like 5 hours, and she argue with all her family, and she think so negatively, and it's a clear symptom of depression, especially not being able to sleep and the mental swings. I was going to say, "Oh, you look like you have depression." Then I realized if I say this, she will not accept it, and she would be so defensive. So at the end, I talked with her. I said, "Oh, you look like you have very strong symptoms of stress. Don't you think you should look for some help to get rid of some of the stress?" And she heard it. She said, "Yes, I'm really stressed. I really need to talk with my doctor to get some help with sleep, etc." Then I realized the actual wording doesn't matter, be it stress or depression or mental disorder, as long as they go get help.
That's a great point. Because it goes back to what you said earlier about like coded language. Stress is one of those words that is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Like especially in work, like people are stressed. Stress is something that we all experience in general anyway. And sort of these mental issues we have is a form of stress in a way. But this is such a perfectly acceptable term that's a great term to use for sure. So that was great. And the whole stigmatizing thing.
Yeah,
that's the big issue because people just don't want to admit it. And even, I think you're right. It's more important to get people to take action than even just to admit it. Because I feel, for instance, I'm at a point where I'm not in denial of certain issues that I may or may not have. And see, even that wording was terrible. That I have. But at the same time, for instance, right now, I'm not really actively seeking help or trying to improve myself because I'm still, even though I admit it. So here's the thing, ironically, I'm in a podcast where you and I are talking about this quite publicly, but broken up again.
Yeah. You can start to talk again from the issues I may or I may not have.
Which is terrible. But no, what I wanted to say is sort of the issues that I have. I'm still in general, this might sound ironic because I'm on a podcast with you talking about this publicly. I'm a very bottled up person trying not to talk too much about my inner world, which you would think is a weird trait for someone who goes on stage a lot and talks about themselves. But the good thing for me in going on stage is talking to strangers. I don't have to talk to people I know. I don't have to talk to people I love. These are strangers. Even though the most important thing in stand-up comedy is creating a connection, a personal connection with the audience of people, it's still sort of a general you. It's a general other. So it's not someone that sort of can that I don't really fear that judgment that much. Like even though obviously it feels terrible when your joke isn't working and you're bonding, that's obviously a terrible feeling. But I don't like when you talk to your loved ones, you have a permanent social relationship with them, and that judgment I fear a lot more than I do fear the audience's judgment. So I feel a lot more at ease talking about issues, not even like issues in general, any type of issues, but like an audience rather than people around. So I feel that's for instance something that I need to work on myself, where I feel like I'm not in denial, so I'm admitted, but I'm still not doing anything about it, really, as you saw it. So that's definitely sad. For instance, I'll give you another example. So my partner and my kids that were away in Mexico, they went back to Mexico for about 2 months. So I was here by self-improvement for a month and a half, and that was a tough time for me. Like I now in hindsight, I would, for instance, pathologize. I would say I was depressed for sure, because I had these classic symptoms of I slept very little. My sleeping schedule got very erratic, so like sometimes I would sleep at night a couple of hours, and sometimes I would sleep during the day and not sleep at night, and it would just be very erratic in general. And I had days where I just wouldn't go out, just wouldn't leave the bed. Like I would pretend to work. You know how you at work and you pretend to work, but you're really just on Facebook and YouTube. So I would even pretend to myself to work while in bed. I was like, I don't need to leave the bed. I can just work from here. But then you don't even work then. And so, and again, just overeating as well at the same time. So that was another period, like a month, where I had sort of a rapid weight gain. And so yeah, that was a really tough month and a half for me. Then at the time, probably the same thing. At the time, I probably wouldn't have wanted to call it like I'm depressed or depression, but I would just call it exactly like the program would call it like a tough, it's stressful. It's a very tough time. But yeah, hindsight, I think you can clearly say that I was depressed.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. You said even you are on this podcast, mental illness podcast, you kind of still not admitting it to yourself. I do experience it. For example, now I'm running a weekly hangout session for mental support group. So it's clearly stated it's for people who with mental illness, and I even have people come into the Zoom meeting say I don't have mental illness, I just come here to make friends.
I just want to listen to everybody else's issues. I don't have any issues. I just need some friends. So, I'm perfectly well. Just need someone to connect to.
Yeah, so when I hear things like this, I was like, okay, fine, you can call it
welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, we don't label ourselves. Everyone is welcome.
Exactly.
And they would even talk about like, oh, I really don't have issues. I have friends who have issues, but not me. Yeah. I'm healthy. I don't need the treatment. I am perfectly fine. And they want you to stress again and again. They are okay. I was like, yeah.
No, it's great that you're not using LinkedIn as a form of entry. You should have like a password. It's just like when you start the Zoom meeting, you just show your cuts first, and then it's like, okay, you can stay.
but with the labels and the diagnosis, I think it's funny because lots of people who never been to therapy or psychiatrist, they are not sure if they have depression or mental disorder. They say they are never diagnosed. But in reality, because I go to see the doctors very often, I realize the diagnosis from them is not more formal than what I check on internet. Like it's super. I think it's a funny one. Near Gottlieb, that's his stage name. I talked with him. He said, "Oh, I never got a diagnosis, so I'm not sure if I have depression." I was like, "What kind of diagnosis you want? If you go to see a doctor, and they will ask you a list of questions. Basically, if you feel very depressed and couldn't sleep and have suicide thoughts for longer than 2 weeks, then you have depression." Then Nia said, "What the fuck? How weak are white people? 2 weeks? What about 20 years of my whole life?"
Yeah.
Suicide thoughts for 2 weeks. They call it depression? What kind of pussies are they?
White people disease,
Yeah. So
yeah, but it's this whole thing about what you were saying about sort of denial and sort of feeling like you need to be strong and just power through on your own, like So, but yeah, it's a whole labeling thing about like you're just maybe not in denial of the issue, but certainly, and I feel the same way, even though I had a form of diagnosis a long while ago. is you at least want to deny the label. Like even if you admit to yourself you have some kind of issues, you're like, no, I'm not that crazy.
Yeah. I think everyone.
I'm not formally crazy. I'm just informally crazy. I'm casually crazy.
Yeah, I think everyone deal with the label differently. For me, when I know I was depressed, probably there was a period I was in denial. But as soon as I pass the time and get treatment, start to talk about it, I actually really like the label that I'm depressed because growing up, I was always an outsider and I never fit in. And finally, now there's a label make me fit in with so many people, and I have a formal reason to be a pussy, and I'm really happy.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm afraid of. Maybe that's maybe that's a masculinity issue, but it's that whole thing of, at least for me, that's how I feel it. Like I don't want it to be an excuse. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to have the label and say, well, this excuses all of my bad behavior. You know what I mean? So I don't want to be in that position. So because I still have that feeling of like, but you still need to be able to deal with it. You know?
I really like the label. For example, when I talk with my mom, she sometimes would say, "Oh, why are you in such bad temper? And why you cannot keep a job? Because right now I'm on sick leave again from my current job." And then she's like, "Oh, why is this? Why is that?" And I was like, "Oh, because I'm depressed." and she couldn't
understand. Out of that
yeah. And I would tell her, listen, you have diabetes, so you need to go see doctor. And I have depression, so I have depression symptoms, which is I cannot work now, and I feel way more self-accepting. For example, right now I'm not going to work. And if I don't have depression, I would think I'm a loser, that my life is falling apart, and I cannot achieve anything. And now I'm just thinking,
all right. Yeah. Don't pile on.
Now I'm just thinking like, I have cancer, but it's a different type of cancer. If I have a physical cancer, I wouldn't go to work. So now I have depression. I'm not going to work. It's normal, and I accept it.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Of course. Yeah. If that actually helps you, that's ideal. I don't know. Do you think that there's a difference between men and women when it comes to that? The question of self-acceptance and how useful that label is for you?
I think probably there's a difference between men and women, and also like how you grew up, your cultural background. I think there are lots of factors in it, and everyone has their own unique journey.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what you label it or how you accept it. At the end, the goal is to live a more happy and satisfying life. And however to achieve it is your decision, but try to get better.
Yeah, it's like a great call to action that I'm probably going to ignore over the next couple of years.
But there's a simple step you can get better. Let me check. Give me I cannot find the book right now. Anyway, there's a really, really good book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So the author, he is a sleep scientist from Harvard. He studies sleep his whole life. One of main takeaway for me is that even you have a group of perfectly healthy people and young people, and you just sleep deprive them for 1 hour per day for 2 weeks. Most of them and send them to see psychiatrists. Most of them would get a diagnosis of some sort of mental illness, and he looks through all the mental illness diagnosed there is, and found out there's not even one single mental illness have interaction with sleep pattern.
Sleep is always an issue, basically.
Yes. So if you don't want to audience also, if you don't want to label yourself with mental illness. You can just code it as I have some sleep issues. And as soon as you start to work on your sleep pattern and to develop a more healthy lifestyle around sleep, your whole mental health would get much, much better.
That's incredibly useful. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, excellent. Cool. I think I'm gonna start working on sleep issues. That's it.
Yeah,
Especially someone from Harvard says it. It's such a reputable institution. It must be true.
Yeah, and also, for example, this time when I had my depression episode, I could clearly tell that sleep is the first major symptoms. I couldn't sleep, and so stressed. I was very stressed. There was tremendously amount of stress. Then I couldn't sleep. Then the less I sleep, the more agitated, irritated, and irrational I am during the day. Then it's a vicious circle. So I immediately I knew there's an issue. I start to use the medicine. I will write it on the description later. It's a type of medicine. It originally was a antidepressant, but the effect was very low, but it has a huge side effect of sleepiness. So they start to use it as a sleep medicine. So as soon as I have this episode, I start to use it. This time during Christmas, I watched a master class by Measure Worker on sleep. So I brush off the memories of the knowledge around sleep again. I realized, even I have read the book, I still have done lots of things wrong in the past period. And so since 2 weeks ago, I start to follow the best practice he recommended on the master class. And I have been already 5 days not using the medicine and being able to sleep nicely.
That's great. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But do you feel like even because I think again this is great sort of coded language, not sort of to admit the stigma to talk about sleep issues, but at the same time, do you feel that even sleep issues is something that's hard to accept for people? Because I sometimes feel, because I remember that was the case for me before I started seeking help 10 years ago, that I wouldn't even admit there were sleep issues. In fact, I would take pride in the fact that I would only sleep like 3 to 4 hours a night, and even though I would feel terrible for months, like during the day. For me, it was a sign of productivity. It's like, no, this is great. I'm such a great person, I'm such a great productive person. I only need 3 to 4 hours. A night. So yeah, I feel that might be something
I think what you said is exactly right. Same example, the friend I met this Christmas, I told her she has a stress issue. She's like, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. I'm doing great. And I don't have sleep issues. I only need to sleep 5 hours because that's how I function. That's how I perform. And even I only sleep 5 hours, I can work greatly and I perform amazingly. I was like, no.
I'm a high functioning sleepwalker.
Yeah, I was like, not really. You are like, when you are awake, you are arguing with everyone and you hate everyone. It's it's not a good sign that you slept nicely. Also in the book, the author, he addressed that lots of people claim that they are high functioning people and biologically they only need 5 hours of sleep. Also, the society around us promote this kind of behavior. Say it's a symptom, it's a sign of high functioning people, and lots of famous people they claim they actually do that. Which he said, there are some people biologically they only need to sleep less than 6 hours per day, but the chance you are one of those people is less than the chance you get eaten by a shark. And for example,
which is minuscule, but that's the problem because some of those people, because you said like some of those very successful people who claim that their claims might actually be truthful, but again, it's a problem of distribution. Because for those very few very successful people who do that, that might actually be true. But again, like you said, it's very unlikely that it's true for so many people, or at least as many people as lay claim to that. And I definitely was in that place. Like I know for a fact, like, and also that's one of the reasons why I took on many jobs. Like, for instance, I was in university working. So I was working at university, and then aside from that, I had 2 other jobs. And then on top of that, I was in like student groups. I was in 2 different student groups, and I was in student council. So that's an insane amount of sort of workload and stress load. And I would regularly sleep only like a couple of hours a night. And again, for me, it was a total sign of productivity, and I totally convinced myself at the time. So this is like 14 years ago, 13 years ago. I totally convinced myself. No. This is me. I'm just that good, and biologically, it's just easy for me to do it, and I can totally do it until you eventually get burned out.
Yeah. I think it's a mistake people very easily to make. That to not balance your workload and thinking you can manage. Even I knew I have depression. And this time when I go back to work, I still overload myself with an extraordinary amount of work and also comedy and everything. And I was constantly busy, and I was so proud. I was like, yeah, I can do this. Then one day I collapsed. I was like, oh, now it makes sense why I collapsed. That was a sign why I was so proud at that time instead of just say I need a break.
It's such a weird thing, this whole thing about trying to create some sort of positive self-image of this very successful persona of yourself. It's such a weird thing, because I remember I put on things on my plate where as soon as I put them on, I knew immediately, like, that's not going to work. Like, I know I won't be able to do it. But then you're like, no, I can do it. Like, I've done all this other stuff in the past. Like, I can definitely do this. And then things start falling apart. Things just, either you start falling apart, or the things you're trying to achieve are falling apart. Like, something's gonna give, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's just weird things. And then some of the ways I dealt with it as well, I would try to then weasel my way out of commitments. Like, I remember there was this one student group that I was in only briefly for like half a year, I think. I forgot. And then I took on a leading role in that student group, thinking like, oh yeah, I can do all of this. Like, look at all the other stuff I achieved. And after just a few months, just a few weeks even, I immediately realized like this is not going to work. Like, I can't do it because, again, my sleep issues got worse, and my performance also significantly decreased. And instead of sort of telling them, listen, I took on too much responsibility, I can't handle it. What did I say? I forgot. I made up some outlandish claim about what was it? About like why I can't do this anymore. I think it was about the girlfriend moving away or something like that. Like, I need to go. Something insane. And just to get out of that.
With the sleep issue, this topic again, I think it's interesting. In the book I recommended, the guy...
What's his name again? Matthew Walker?
Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so he said there's for example the President Reagan, he claims he only sleep 5 hours per day, and he was very proud and promoting it, and then he got Alzheimer.
Also, I was just gonna say, wasn't President Reagan dead most of the time in office? I don't think that counts. It's not sleeping.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I think it's really important to sleep nicely. So you work on your sleeping issue, right?
I shall. No, thank you. No, thank you. This is, I mean, like I said, as much as I sort of don't really want to talk about it, I do appreciate that you are bringing this further to the forefront, because again, I am quite thankful that when you put that show together, it gave me sort of like another point of, okay, yeah, maybe you need to sort of look at yourself again and maybe do something. And then like, same thing now. Like, thank you for that conversation, because again, it gives me just another little, nip in the butt to say, okay, let's maybe work on my sleep issues, or like do something. So as much as I'd like to convince myself I'm some kind of high-functioning successful person, I mean, now it's very clear that I'm not, because I'm not allowed to work. We're not doing anything right now. So it's like, okay,
Yeah, I think the high functioning this description, I think is interesting, because before I collapsed this time, I was also believing, oh, I'm so high functioning, I'm so achieving, and I'm so perfect. And one day it just collapsed. And but I think it's good, at least with the experience I had before. I know I wasn't in denial for too long.
Oh, it's great. No, but that is really good, because I think for myself, I was in denial for quite a bit, because to the point I started seeking help. That's been, I mean, if I think it's on 12 or 13, which probably, I'm guessing, but let's say that's the time. And it did take at least 9 to 12 years, something like that, when I did start actively seeking some help. So you're absolutely right. That's what you said, didn't it? Wasn't it? Like you said, it took like 10 years. So now back then it's 9 to 12, I would say. So yeah, it does take a long time just to get over that. And then I think for myself, what happened a lot is I might have just admitted it, but I'm still not really doing very much about it, which is still it's the next step. It's the next phase.
Yeah. So with the current situation, or in general, do you have some days that you wake up, it's just, it's a bad day and you don't...
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I have those days. Maybe was it last week? I think last week, where I don't even get up. Like it's like I'm in bed, and my kid jumps on the bed. It's like, hey, let's go, let's do something, let's play. And I'm like, no, just play with your sister or play with your mom. So you feel like I don't just want to do anything. And there was a day where I then, just because of the fact that you have the responsibilities, you just need to get up. So I somehow brought myself to get up, have breakfast and stuff. And then later on in the afternoon, I asked my father, hey, can you just take care of the kids for a while? I'm going to work. I just need like 2 hours to work. And then I went back to my cubicle and I fell asleep. I slept the rest of the and unless she would have woken me up at, I forgot what it was, at 7, because she had some kind of meeting where she needed me to take care of the children, I'm pretty sure I would have just slept through the rest of the day. And so yeah, I do have like days like that still, but again, it sort of helps. At least that's been my experience. It does help to have children, because you kind of, because of the responsibilities that you can't really deny that you have, you can't linger too much on these feelings and these thoughts. So you just have to, like this example, you have to get up. You just have to get up and feed your children. You can't spend the whole day in that. It's just not a possibility. Like the time that I was without my children, without my partner at home, I could just do that. I could just fall into that hole and just wallow in my self-despair for a while. Which, when you have different responsibilities, you just can't.
With this kind of bad days, do you have some, like, your routine to get out of it?
No, I don't. Like, for instance, in that example, I think that was an example of a day where it just didn't work, because I was I mean, even though I felt like, oh, this is like a bad day, this is not really working for me, I sort of didn't really admit it to myself during that day. And then the way I went around it is just pretended to work. Which I wasn't pretending. Like I was going there, I wanted to work, and I just couldn't. I just fell asleep. And so that to me is an example of something where it didn't work, because I didn't find a way to sort of. And it's not about being productive. Oh, I needed those 2 hours to work. I clearly didn't. I just did it the next day or a couple of days later. That's actually not true. One of those things I still haven't done. There's some tech stuff I need to be working on. But my point is, I wasn't successful in the sense that I didn't find a good mechanism or a good way to somehow get myself to get through that day.
Is working a way for you to get out of it? Because I'm quite surprised, because like you have so many shows in Berlin when there's no lockdown almost every day. How do you every day can make yourself to go to the shows and perform?
That's the thing. That's what I was saying. I think that is actually one of my coping mechanisms. I put on a lot of workload, and that outer responsibility is the thing that gets me to actually do something. I have had days as well even before the lockdown, where I wouldn't really do anything during the day, even though I was supposed to work. I was supposed to also do some promo. And then the only reason I did do something that day is because there was a show that I was producing, which meant I had to go there. Nobody else was going to do it for me. Like, you know, like when, and I've had, like when you're on a bill somewhere, you can find a way to get out of that. You can just tell them you're sick or whatever. But when you're the producer of that show, there's no way that you cannot do it. I mean, you could ask people, hey, can you help me out? I'm feeling sick or whatever. But 90% of the time, 99% of the time, you just have to go. And I think for me, as much as it's a problem in and of itself, where you stress yourself out to a degree where you will eventually burn out, it is a coping mechanism for me to deal with just lying down and not doing anything, is just putting on more and more workloads. Work has been, has been my main coping mechanism.
I totally can understand. I really hope shows can come back soon.
For my own health, for sure.
So finally, we can have a daily rhythm to get out of house, to talk with people, and to get dressed, brush your teeth, wash your face.
It's insanity. I mean, it's such a shameful thing to admit, but there's days when, like, literally it's been 3 days in a row where I didn't put on pants and didn't brush my teeth, and you just said, okay, this is not great.
So I'm glad at least the work comedy shows helps you. Although right now it's a little bit hard, but
right now not so much.
But I hope shows can come back soon. Maybe like in March already. I hope.
We'll see. I think it's more likely probably the April where the first couple of things will. I think as soon as sort of the climate gets slightly better, like that's like late April, May-ish, they'll start lifting some more restrictions. Where I think earliest, that's my conviction, the earliest will be back early April with quite a few restrictions, and I think they will start lifting maybe some restrictions depending on how the vaccination rounds go. Then as soon as spring comes around, so that's like May-ish, I would say.
I'm thinking like if the current restriction relax a bit, and the weather is not that cold anymore, we can start to do some outdoor shows.
We'll see. I don't know. I mean, outdoor shows in like April generally not that great.
But at least better than nothing, right?
It's better than nothing. That's for sure. That's certainly true. Well, I'll just have to wait and see. The experience so far here in Germany has been that the government and even the state governments have not been very understanding and accommodating to the hygiene concepts that sort of the event and cultural industry has put in place. So basically, even though you have a concept like you just described, let's just have it on open air with distancing, right? Let's do that. Generally speaking, they just have not been very accommodating. They basically said like, no, you shall not work. Whatever hygiene concept you thought of, you may have even coordinated with the Gesundheitsamt, with the health agency. Doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter. You don't produce cars. You don't matter. I don't know. So we'll see about that. I'm not too confident that they'll loosen restrictions up until the point. And in fact, I think just because our industries, gastronomy and event business, have been the first to go, I'm pretty sure we'll be the last to come back. And the truth is that they don't really care that much about art and the event industry. They really don't, apparently, given the actions.
It's a hard year. It's more than a hard year. I hope after this, let's say after this spring, we can fully come back and have booming years to follow. Let's wrap this up.
So thank you so much. Thanks so much for giving me the chance to talk to you about this. Because again, it's like just one of those things where a specific purpose to talk about it and to reflect on things is sort of a call to action. This is another instance for myself to start doing something rather than just to sort of think about it and then not doing
I'm thinking maybe after the podcast, when situation a bit better, I invite you to my running club.
Oh yeah. That's a good idea, actually. Cool.
Yeah.
No, I'd like to do that.
Yes. Yeah, because I also need some motivation. In the last 5 years, in total, I run 500 meters. So I think it's time to start.
I, for the longest time, like, for instance, one of the reasons I don't like gyms is I don't like to exercise with no particular purpose. Like, I was always really big on sports. Like, I love to, like, for instance, before lockdown, well, not immediately before lockdown, there was a long period I didn't really do anything, but previously I was playing tennis a bit, and then I played basketball before that. So I really enjoyed sort of just doing something where there's a game involved, there's some kind of goal. Just sort of running, I've tried it a couple of times, and I don't know, I don't like it.
Maybe you can.
But when there's another person involved, or there's a group of people involved, now it becomes a different thing. Not because your goal is to be quicker than them, but now it's a social setting. So again, you have that responsibility. Well, the group is meeting.
Maybe we can develop a comedy show where everyone needs to move.
Running comedy show?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I've actually done shows outside. I did these comedy walks. There's this group in the Netherlands that put this together. And I developed a walk around the Berlin Wall. And there was a whole thing of just, you have just a ton of people around, and you would do a little bit, a small set, and then you would walk. You do another small set, and you would walk, and it was all about that. So that was kind of funny. And they even asked me, "Hey, can't you just do that with the restrictions?" I said, "There's no way I can do this." Because think about it, it's already tough to be outside, and there's like typically, how many is it? Like 10 people in front of you, but you're outside. You're trying to work against all the distractions that you have outside to deliver like a comedy set. So there's that. And now imagine that same setting, and all of the 10 people are 1.5 meters or 2 meters away from one another. It's complete insanity. There's no way I can do that. There's no way I can successfully do any type of comedy in that setting.
Yeah, I think that's a very good concept. Actually, when I was depressed, I was thinking, maybe after lockdown, I can persuade you to lead the group for free, so I can force myself to go out the house every day.
Let's talk about it. No, I definitely like to join. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to do for sure.
Yeah. So my last question is, what's your favorite comedy special?
My favorite comedy special?
Yeah.
It's a very good question. And every comedian should be prepared for this question, I suppose. That's okay. Before I answer it, because I need some time to think about it, I will ramble on a bit. And that currently I'm actually watching that many specials. Like, there's a million different Netflix specials that have come out in the last couple of years. And I generally don't watch them. I always say, that's my excuse, I don't have time. And to a degree, that's true. To other degree, it's an excuse, because when you say you don't have time, what you really mean is it's not important enough for me to make the time. And so, yeah, a lot of times I kind of try to shy away from the specials because I don't want to be too influenced by what someone else is doing. And I'm slightly wary of the quality of a lot of these things, even with like people that I adore. I think they're fantastic comedians. I sometimes feel like, they've got another Netflix special. It's been a year since the last one. Yeah, I don't know about that. And so I don't know. So I would probably harken back to one of the older ones. There was one. There is one by. I'm trying to remember the name. There's one by George Carlin in the late 80s that where he talks about. He always talks about language anyway, but sort of the use of language in sort of corporate America and how they're misusing and twisting words. I think that was something that I connected very strongly to. That whole special felt very tight, very well organized. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it though. I will have to look that up. But I have it basically. You know how it is? Like, you think of a special, you immediately see a shot of it. Like you immediately see the stage, you immediately see the person where they're positioned in a specific part of the set. You're like, oh yeah, I totally remember that. So I have it in front of me. I don't know the name of it though. But yeah, I would say probably the Down set from the late 80s, the HBO special. That was fantastic.
Okay, cool. I write to you later to get the name and put it on the description.
I will look it up now and then I'll write it to you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for being on this and talk about it openly. I hope we can smash the shame of mental illness and have more people.
Yeah. No, that's why we have you to do that, because that seems to be your mission. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you for being this and have a nice day. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Take care.